as always, gets me every time.
I didn't see a countdown this time. I
had
for a while. They were showing us the countdown, and now just like the red box popped up. We're live. Hey, oh, okay.
Spring's on. Yeah, countdown would be nice, but you know what? I guess surprise. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Garrett Philbin here in the financial coaches community, along with Scott Maderer, a frequent guest and fantastic human and coacher of coaches, all of the good things. Excited to have you back every other week. Scott, thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here. It's always fun.
Yeah.
Interesting to see what different people ask, and just remind people if they're watching live and they've got a question, they can always put it into the comments, because we will try to address that during the call today if we can.
Yep. Thanks for bringing that up. So just use those. I always like to do typing like little
velociraptor hands.
So if you have any questions, just be a little velociraptor and type them in the comments, and Scott and I can see them live, and so we'll answer them on the live. This is what you get every other Tuesday. So what we have today.
Well, we were talking about drinking before the call started, so there you go.
Drinking Coca-Cola.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's what you said. Yeah,
absolutely. Today we have two questions that we're excited to dive into that were asked in the past week from a couple coaches in this group. And again, if you have any questions yourself, go put them in the comments and we'll get to them after those. So I want to start off with the first one, which is, how do you deal with people who have anxiety about confronting their finances in order to avoid the pain of the mess they made? Scott, what did we come up with before we went live?
Well, the truth, hypnosis was what we decided. We both decided these are not the budgets you're looking for. Jedi mind tricks. Now, and it is a little bit of a mind trick. I mean, a lot of it has to do with how you set the context from the very, very beginning. So even in assessment calls, a lot of times if I start picking up on beating myself up behavior, I've been a total screw up with my money my whole life, and that kind of stuff, I'll literally stop them mid-conversation right then and there and go, okay, one of the things about coaching is it's about looking forward more than you look back. Now, we want to look back because we want to learn from mistakes that we made, but we want to move forward. The energy is directed forward. So you can use the analogy of a windshield in the rearview mirror, right? You can drive a car. Which is bigger, your windshield or your rearview mirror? Your windshield. Why? Because you want to look forward more than you look back. There's still a rearview mirror. You still want to look back, but you just kind of glance at it. You don't sit there and stare at the rearview mirror. You're not a really effective way to drive unless you're in reverse. So it's the same sort of analogy. I'll talk to you about putting energy forward instead of back. You made the best decisions you could at the time with the information you had. Therefore, you can't really beat yourself up for the fact that now you have new information, right? None of us can tell the future. Trust me, if I had that power, I would be a multi-billionaire. It always find it interesting that people that claim to be able to tell the future aren't filthy rich, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day. It's because I can't use my gift for money. Yeah, right. Okay. Because at least one of them would. Okay, that's what I'm saying. That whole left, right, back. Hey, we're back on track. When you're dealing with somebody who's confronting and beating themselves up, most of it is just about addressing that energy and redirecting the energy forward. You also need to do a really good job of being their cheerleader, celebrating their wins. By the way, celebrating wins does not mean ignoring reality, but everything can be turned into a win. Hey, you only wrote 6 hot checks this month. Last month it was 8. Yay! Progress. I mean, seriously, it's like you showed up to the meeting on time. Yay! I can find something to celebrate. Okay. The drooling stopped, whatever, it's like find something to celebrate a win and move the energy forward. A lot of times helps people begin to overcome that, because quite frankly, if they're beating themselves up, you don't need to do that too. They're already doing enough of it. You don't need to add to it. So that's a lot of it. And it is kind of a mind trick. And of course, you have to find a balancing act with that. I mean, you still have to hold people accountable and push them sometimes. We have a trick that in Coach Connections, and if you sign up for the free resources guide, you see this in a video. We call it the 10 push, where we ask people early on, how hard can we push them, from a 1 to a 10, where a 1 is, I'm your buddy, whatever you say goes. And a 10 is, I'm kind of really in your face and tell you what's up. By the way, very seldom does someone give less than a 5. Every once in a while they do, but it's pretty rare. Most people, by the time they come to coaching, they're up in that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 range. And the neat thing is, by calling that out and going, hey, wait a minute. Way back at the beginning, I asked you how hard I could push you, and you said, what is it that you said again? And you scroll up and you look at the number and you go, oh yeah, you said an 8. Okay, so here's going to be my 8 push. And then you say what you need to say. Here's the truth. They don't have any idea what an 8 is. There's no context for that. There's no, so but it gives you a permission to speak into their life and speak directly when you need to. So it's a way of turning that accountability without making it quite so heavy. And a lot of it comes down to that. It's your ability to push without beating someone up, because usually they're doing enough of that on their own.
There's enough, as the question said, anxiety, guilt, shame, fear, stress around money. They don't really need us piling it on. And that's something that I would add, is taking a leaf out of Brené Brown and her TED Talks and her books, where I hear the language a lot of times so Brené Brown differentiates guilt and shame. Guilt being I am wrong, versus shame, I did something wrong.
Right.
And so that's another way that when I reflect back to clients or prospects, like you said, if you hear it in an assessment call, you say, hey, here's what I'm hearing, and say all the same things that you said. And it's not like you suck at money, which is some of the language I will hear. It's not like you are doomed forever. Right. I really want to make this distinction between, like, I am wrong, I will never be good enough, I will consistently suck at this for the rest of my life, or I made some decisions that, in hindsight, maybe you think that you could have done a better job, but also you did the best with the information that you had at the time. So let's realize that you're not destined to be terrible with money. You're also taking action right now, right? Highlighting that they are moving forward. Right. And so let's stay in this place of, it was the decision that you wish you would have done differently. And now you're taking the actions to make sure that future decisions will be done more consciously, with more intention and awareness. So high five. Psh, psh, psh. There. That's one of my favorite games with clients. It's like 1, 2, 3. And we always hit different side of the screen at different times. But
and whether or not they've mirrored their screen determines
the struggle is real, but we enjoy it.
The one thing that you said too that I'll call out. So, again, also big fan of Brené Brown and her talks on vulnerability and the difference in guilt and shame. I've used the phrase, and I've taught this to clients, that one of the mistakes that we make as human beings, and this is just, we've all done it at least once in our life, you've done this, is we do what I call the 3 Ps. We make something, whatever it is, and we talk about it as if it's permanent, pervasive, and personal. So personal, kind of go in reverse. Personal is not that sucked, but I suck. I am a failure with money. I am an idiot. I am whatever, right? Personal. Permanent, I failed at money yesterday and I'll always fail at money. There's no hope, right? And pervasive, not only do I fail at money, I'm also going bald. Everything is right. It's just like everything affects everything else. Your whole life is going to heck in a handbasket. There's never anything good. It just pervades all areas of your life. Generally, when someone does that, when they make something what I call the 3 Ps, it's always a lie. It's like it's just always a lie. And yet, right, if you think about it, that kind of mental behavior can really trap us into non-action and anxiety and worry and guilt and fear and, all of these negative emotions that hold us back. And sometimes it's just teaching yourself to recognize that language. And so me as a coach, I get to call it out when I hear it in other people. It's also one of the reasons that I say coaches need coaches, because oftentimes I'll find myself saying the same thing and it's hard for me to catch myself doing it. I'll have one of those days and be the same mindset. I can recognize it in my clients and call it out. It's much harder when it's see it in yourself. It's and it's something that, I think we all do it at least some of the time. I was in a talk with like 700 people, something like that. I was giving a talk and I asked people, how many of you have a voice inside your head that talks to you? Every single hand in the room went up. I said, now, how many of you does that voice routinely say really nice things? Every single hand went down. Our internal voice, and this is true of your clients too, our internal voice is usually in there going, you're an idiot. You'll always be an idiot. You screwed up today. You'll screw up tomorrow. Don't worry, about it. It's going to be, there's nothing you can do about it. It makes them those 3 Ps, the permanent, pervasive, and personal. And when you get in that mindset, somebody else has to help call it out and break you out of it, because it becomes a habit. Just like anything else, it becomes a habit and a routine.
That's where with clients who have a meditation or mindfulness practice, or even if they're just aware of what those things are, it can be another way to just connect it and say, oh yeah, that's the voice in your head, that's the monkey mind, that's something
lizard brain, what? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just another way to, like, some people have heard of Brené Brown and what she talks about. Other people have experience with mindfulness and meditation. So there are a lot of different ways that you can connect it in a way that might be relevant to the person across the screen from you.
Mm-hmm. The other and on the monkey mind or lizard brain or whatever term you want to use, what's interesting is if you work with a client for a while and you start, and you'll have your way of phrasing it. I talk about the 3 Ps. Somebody else can talk about something else. It doesn't have to be my language. But the point is, when you begin to make a habit of calling that out, I'll have clients stop themselves like mid, like 4 words into the sentence and be like, wait, I made that personal and it's really not. Back up and start over. After a while, they start to pick up the pattern. You're breaking the habit. Another trick, by the way, I've named my internal voice. Okay. My internal voice is named Harvey. Okay. He looks like a duck-billed platypus, but he's purple and wears a yellow birthday, like cone birthday hat. Okay. And so when he shows up, I just go, hey, Harvey, how you doing? Because it's kind of routine. Harvey shows up occasionally. Now, does that work all the time? Of course not. Nothing works all the time. But does it help me kind of break out of a funk and get out of that, breaks that routine? Yeah. And again, tricks, there's things you can teach the client. Don't be afraid to try stuff. Different things work for different people. Don't be afraid to talk to them about what's worked for you in the past when you've kind of gotten into these, these behaviors. Well, nothing. Okay. Well, let's try some things then. Now you have permission to experiment, because, and because a lot of times, by the way, the reason I said, well, nothing is because a lot of times if they're in a funk, that's what they're going to say, even if it's not the truth, because that's what they see right now. That's their reality today.
That's what their Harvey would tell them. Or is telling them. I would say, because that's the story that their Harvey is telling them.
Right. That's what that internal voice, that's the internal narrative.
And I love, by the way, that you made it a platypus and that you gave it a fun little hat, because mine used to be named Chad, and I was like, oh, who's the most annoying name that I would have? For some reason, I'm like, Chad. I've just never met a Chad I like. So sorry.
So it's Chad's like the female Karen. Is that what you're going for here? Okay.
I don't know. That meme is just so ubiquitous, by the way. It's so good.
I
But
feel
yes,
sorry for anyone named Karen who's nice though. It's like oh man, you know?
co-opted. But that idea, I think it is helpful to label it as something that's not like a negative, to not deem the voice in a negative way, but to give it some kind of playful aspect. So
Right.
you could just say like, look, yeah, this is the bear riding in a unicycle with a horn. It's like it's just come in to take over, take my attention away. And so framing it more as a less bad thing. That was really well phrased, eloquent, Philbin. But I think that is a really good way to look at it versus kind of it being a negative thing that you have to get rid of because it'll never go away.
Psychologically, what you're doing with that kind of behavior is called a pattern interrupt. You're trying to create a mental image that breaks the flow of the past pattern of behavior. Okay. Having been someone, by the way, who's been treated for clinical depression, who's been through years of therapy and done all of that, you know, if you haven't gone through therapy, consider going through therapy.
Sure.
You know? By the way, it had nothing to do with whether you got problems or not either. Okay. It's just, it will give you tools in your toolbox for yourself too. Because again, as a coach, folks, this is an emotionally draining job. You know, it really can be. And being able to you know, have some things that some tools in your toolbox that can help you reset your emotional state, really beneficial, you know, in terms of your own mental health and well-being too, because it can be tough, you know, when you're dealing with a client that has anxiety and fear and anger, and you're pouring a lot of emotional energy into them. That drains you. You know, that energy has to come from somewhere, and you know, it comes from you. And it's also why, you know, again, we talk about this, it seems like every time we talk, getting back to figuring out who do you really want to work with, you know, because if you're jazzed by the client with the anxiety, dude, go get 50 of them, you know, and it'll charge your batteries. If you're not, if you're drained, limit the number of that kind of client that you take. Don't take 50. It'll kill you, you know, it'll drain your energy and you'll quit, and we'll lose a good coach. Instead, you know, try to find your lane and work with those people that give you the most energy. And by the way, there are people that love the client with the anxiety and the worry and the, you know, great. You know, I'm glad they exist because I'm not always really jazzed about working with them. So I'll send them to somebody else. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction to make. And why we bring it up so often is if you aren't working with the clients that do energize you, you will get burnt out. And we want you to be around and help people.
Yeah.
It's a really good point to make. Anything else that you want to add to that before we switch gears?
The other thing I guess I would give permission is if you're a newer coach, because I just told you, you know, try not to take 50 of those. If you're a newer coach, begin to pay attention to what clients say and how they act as early as the very first conversation you have with them. Get better at identifying what's going on. And there is an art, you know, that's an art. That's not a science. There's still times that I have clients that it's, you know, 4 meetings in and something comes out finally. And usually I'm like, I knew there was something. I just couldn't figure out what the heck it was, you know, but I could pick, you know, my radar was going off. There's something else here. There's more to this story and I'm missing a piece. I just don't know what the piece is. And so I just keep asking questions and kind of poking gently. And eventually, usually the puzzle piece comes out and it's like, got it. Now I understand what's going on. Now we can move forward. But because, again, if they're dealing with anxiety and fear and beating themselves up and past bad behavior and all sorts of stuff, it takes a while for them to build trust and for you to build trust with them before some of that comes out. So don't be surprised if, you know, sometimes it's 5-6 meetings in and then it's like, boop, you know, oh, okay, there's the other shoe. I was wondering when that was going to drop, you know, because usually there's signs. You'll start to see things in the money or you're in the budget or in the behavior or in what they say or how they say it and what they don't say, you know, and then you'll start picking up on something, you know, and again, I think we've talked about this enough for those folks that listen to these all the time. This isn't a judgment piece. It's not about, oh, wow, they put that in their budget. I have had people add line items to their budget that were things that I personally would not ever spend my money on, but they write it in there and put a money on it. Okay. At least they're honest, and at least we're, I know they trust me. Yes, I've seen a few things.
My clients have a weed budget too. It's all good.
Yeah, I've had that. I've had other things as well, but you just, marijuana. Okay. There you go. Whatever. But because it's not about me telling them what they can and can't spend their money on. It's about helping them align their values, their priorities. Interestingly, a lot of times when that starts to happen, some of those vices sometimes decrease because the stress is getting less, and what they're really doing is self-medicating. And that can be alcohol too, by the way. I've seen people with really large alcohol budgets, because of this. So, but our job is not to be a therapist. So I don't want to, to be clear, I'm not telling anyone to go out and do counseling or be a therapist. That's not our job unless you're licensed and certified and have all the right letters behind your name and all of that junk to do it. But there's a degree to what we do in coaching that involves some of the same sorts of mental skill thoughts, and that's why I would encourage you yourself to go through therapy yourself and do some of these things to recognize it so that you can hear it and call it out. And so that you can recognize when someone needs therapy and help them get that into their budget too. Because sometimes it's more than you can fix. That's actually a bad way of saying it, because we never fix anybody, neither do therapists, but it's more than the skills that you have can effectively help the client move forward. And you need to get them somebody who's a specialist in that area, and help them move that way.
Absolutely. Good point. Thanks. I'm glad that you added that last part. Let's dive into, now really switching gears into more of the numbers. Moving from feelings and anxiety and stress and fear to, there we go. Is this a dance move I'm about to see? Break it down. Maderer. There we go. Turn around. Boom.
No, I just turned around. I wasn't dancing this time.
Oh, all right. Well, fine. I'm done then. Second question that we have is, what tools do you use to teach your clients budgeting or cash flow management? Actually, we had a question just come in.
Yeah, I saw that from
related to the other one. Yeah, so let's go ahead and tackle that one. So as a coach, how do you help couples get on the same page with money? One wants to save, the other one thinks debt is fine.
So, and thanks, Rebecca, for the question. I'm going to tweak the question a little bit. So as a coach, I do not ever help anyone get on any page, same or otherwise. In terms of, it's not my responsibility to get the couple on the same page. What it is my responsibility to do is help them identify their priorities, their values, and help facilitate them communicating with each other. What that looks like is injecting tools and techniques. So for instance, requiring them to have a weekly meeting. What's a weekly meeting look like? It's a 15 or 20-minute meeting. And by the way, I tell them you can't meet more than 20 minutes. Here's what's funny. They'll sneak, well, we actually met 35, Great. You talked an extra, you know what I mean? It's like, but it's funny. If you tell them not to do it, they'll do it. And then they feel like they're breaking the rules, And I'll even tell them sometimes, you're not allowed to talk about the budget at that meeting. This has to be a non-budget meeting. It's just a chance to talk. Talk about values, talk about what's important to you, talk about what your goals are, talk about why you want to do these things. Talk about your emotions behind them. Why is it important to you? I'll have them do a why exercise where they each independently write their why and then come together. What's the most important thing to them? It's often not so much that one of them wants to save and the other one thinks debt is fine, as much as it is they both usually have something that they feel is important to them, and what they're disagreeing about is the way to get there.
The how.
Okay. It's the how that they're disagreeing about. That's why the friction's happening. Well, I think we need to get there right now, which means let's borrow. That's the debt, right? Well, I think we should get there slowly and steadily and take our time. I'm not in as big a hurry as you. That's the save mentality, right? So it's a lot of it has them stepping back and identifying that actually you have common ground here in the goal. What you want and why you want it is probably more in alignment than out of alignment. Now we can just start talking about methodology, and at least then you start from a place of agreement. You start from a place of unity. You start from a place of similar direction, and now we can worry about the details. Okay. Because, is there a right or wrong answer to that? Not really. Okay. I mean, again, I don't like debt personally. Don't have any in my life. Don't want it. My wife doesn't want it. But that's because we've had that conversation and come to an agreement. I'm not going to look at somebody else and go, wow, you have a credit card, so you're evil. That's okay. That's what you choose to do, or that's how you choose to get there. But it is about them having that conversation until there's some agreement. And your job as a coach is to just help facilitate the conversation. Not to quote, get them on the same page. And I know that's not really probably exactly how Rebecca meant that, but I just,
kind of using it as an example.
Of the well, and I think it's an important thing because I think a lot of times as coaches, we take on responsibility for things that truly aren't our responsibility,
Yes.
And again, getting back to burnout and frustration, that's a gateway to that, because at the end of the day, you look up and go, well, none of my clients ever do anything. Okay, you could probably get better at some things. You need to learn some skills and develop some things. But at the end of the day, the client has to be the one that takes the action. And that goes for this too with couples and communicating. They have to take the action. You just get to encourage them to take the action. So some of the tools, weekly meeting, having them do things like a why exercise or a priority list exercise where they identify what's important to them and why. And then you can start talking about timelines and, well, okay, great. You both want to get there. One of you is okay taking 6 years and the other one wants to do it in 6 minutes. There's probably a lot of room between those two. Let's generate other options. Okay.
Yeah.
Y'all need to come back next week with 7 other possibilities. I don't care how stupid they are. 7 of them. Okay. Because there's always more than 2 choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that in the sense of as coaches, we're there to create the space for them to have the conversations while giving them a framework for how to have it. And I did a mediation training a long time ago, and another term that they use is positions and interests.
Yep.
So position is like, here's my stake in the ground, right? I want to get there via use of debt. I want to get there only by saving. And then underneath that, kind of the roots underneath are the interests that are generally aligned, but it's people who get very grounded and put their stake in the ground of like, well, here's how it has to be done.
Right.
So especially with couples, I like what you said around talking about their values, their goals. Like what, you two are a team, likely, right? Now, sometimes, which is, I think it's really good that you pointed it out, that you're not there to get couples on the same page, because sometimes these conversations lead to unearthing larger disagreements, where it's not always about the money. Money is a manifestation, or this disagreement over money is a manifestation of a larger problem that's been going on for a really long time. And so if we see it as our goal to fix it or to kind of resolve it harmoniously, that might not actually be what's needed. So that's keeping that neutrality that you were talking about in hey, I'm here to create the space, facilitate the conversation, get them talking on what their goals and values are, but it's not that they have to get on the same page or have to have a like, quote particular outcome.
Yeah. And again, sometimes the right answer in that kind of case is to help them get a different kind of professional involved.
Marriage counselor, therapist.
This may be the tip of an iceberg to a much deeper problem that actually has very little to do about saving in debt and more to do with the fact that they're currently not on the same page in terms of goals and values and priorities and relationship and everything else. Again, I've seen abusive things and found that, when we were working with people. I've found couples that are on the brink of divorce, all of those things show up because the truth is our whole life shows up in our money. So if you're talking to people about money, the old joke is that the people that know you the best are your CPA and your hairdresser. Well, I would add financial coach in that, too. Usually we know a lot about you by the end of the day. I actually had a premarital coaching client where all of a sudden I'm looking at the budget and I'm like, so I literally don't say anything because I figured that he had just bought a ring and was about to propose, and so the next month they send me pictures of the proposal and are like, hey, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of guessed last month, but I was keeping my mouth shut because I didn't know if she knew or not. So I'm like, I can't ask any questions, and luckily I didn't let the cat out of the bag. But yeah, you start to see patterns and you'll start to know things sometimes before, necessarily before the client is supposed to tell you. So that happens too.
That's awesome.
I was really happy I didn't put my foot in my mouth today. Hey, where'd that $6,000 go?
Shh, run away.
Ixnay on the $6,000.
Using that as a segue, kind of looking at budgets, and the question that we got was, what tools do you guys use to teach your clients budgeting and or cash flow management? There were kind of some prompts that were given, like Mint, YNAB, use an Excel sheet, anything else that you use, another kind of system. It's kind of looking, more at the tools.
That's the one that was left off the list.
Oh, pen and paper.
Yeah.
I love that. But
all of the above.
Totally. So, I'm curious, we could talk about the tools. We could also talk about a larger approach. Where do you want to start?
So, currently, I'll cover the tool part first. Currently, I generally, if the client doesn't come in with a strong preference, I tend to use a basic Excel sheet for budgeting. But now, philosophically, okay, some of that depends on who your avatar is, and some of that depends on your style. And then some of that depends on your client and how they approach to things. But I also usually separate spending plan budget from tracking. Planning to me should not be highly automated because you should think. That's kind of the whole point. Tracking, on the other hand, automate the heck out of it. If you want to YNAB, Mint, personal capital, every dollar, whatever. There's 1.5 million of these out there. Pick one. I don't care. That's fine. I don't use those as often for budgeting. And the reason being that I like the act of, having things on a quote piece of paper and manipulating numbers and moving things around. And there's a tangibility to it that I think helps people engage. Honestly, if I could get people to do it with a piece of paper and a pencil, I probably would, but they would revolt, so not to mention the fact that a lot of us aren't really good at math and would probably screw up the math too, so at least with an Excel sheet, it adds and subtracts for you. So we tend to use the Excel sheet because it's kind of the happy medium between pen and paper and full automation. But that again is for the budgeting piece. Tracking, I have clients use all sorts of tools. And And usually, by the way, that's actually where their friction is. It's not the planning piece. It's usually the tracking piece. They oh, I have to pull down my bank account and look at all my things and write all the, and then I have to remember when I went to HEB and it was this, or I went to Walmart and it was that, and what was this and that. It's usually tracking is really where people bog down more. And again, there's a lot of different systems you can inject on the tracking side. Some of those systems are software and tools. Some of those systems are processes like cash envelopes, and it depends on the client. But at the end of the day, you need a process for planning, and you need a system for managing your money. You need a way to figure out your plan, and then you need a way to deal with the fact that money comes in and out and moves from accounts, and you write checks and you swipe cards and you do whatever. And I kind of know where it went, and those things are not necessarily the same tool for everybody. There are different tools that can be injected with different clients. Age has something to do with it. Comfort with technology has something to do with it.
How involved they want to be.
How involved, yeah.
Because and I do the same thing where I use a spreadsheet for planning, and then more often than not, use a tool like YNAB, or if they're already using Mint, they can use Mint or Personal Capital, depending on how involved they want that process to be.
Right.
Generally, YNAB to me is, even though Mint is more bloated, I feel that YNAB is more challenging from a conceptual standpoint for people, and just kind of getting the hang of. Almost everyone gets tripped up on credit cards, even though we spend a fair amount of time with it. There are just certain parts of YNAB that are more challenging for people conceptually, but at the end of the day, they do Mint, YNAB, Personal Capital. They all pretty much do the same thing.
Right.
Tracking. And one thing I've found that is important to set for an expectation for people is that they oftentimes, and this is for my avatar, they come in saying, well, the why Mint categorizes all my transactions wrong, or it doesn't get all of them right. And I think it's important to set an expectation of what those tools will do, and also why it's a good thing that they don't get all the categorizations perfect, because awareness and intentionality and review isn't, at least in my opinion, an important part of what you're doing, so that you take the time to double check what Mint does. And it doesn't take very long to double check those, but to start setting the expectation that there is going to be a greater level of involvement in what they do, but it's not going to take an hour, every week, or an hour even every other week. Right? The more
it gets easier with time,
the shorter it's going to take over time, and that there is a sense of power and control that comes from being in it, and therefore having that awareness and that knowing. So I think that is an important, at least in my experience, helping clients understand that the expectation is not that it's all hands off. Like I said, the planning part does need to be intentional, does not need to be automated, because you really want to think about it every month and really take time to say, okay, with what's coming up over the next 3, 6, 12 months, with where I'm at right now, let me really intentionally be aware of what I'm going to now put in these rows. So that was a good point to make.
And even the budgeting part, there's parts of it that end up being, quote, automatic. If you've got a mortgage or a rental payment, it's probably the same every single month.
Right.
Certain bills will be the same every single month, that kind of thing. So there are things that you can just really quickly fill in. But then there's other stuff where you actually should engage your brain, because, I don't know about anybody else, but my gas bill has been really low the last 3 or 4 months. Turns out the car is really fuel efficient if you don't drive it. It gets remarkable miles to the gallon.
And if gas goes down by like a third in price, that also has something to do with that.
Right. Yeah. So there's things like that you can put into thinking, right? Guess what? Your meal and travel expenses are different in December and November usually than they are in February or March for most people, except, well, I guess March might be spring break, but still, my wife and I had September and October. We always added a line item to our budget that basically was buy crap from fundraisers because, every kid has a fundraiser. And, when you worked in the corporate world, like I used to, it was a requirement that you buy something from other people's kids because they turned around and bought something from your kid. So, it was just kind of this unspoken rule, right? So, we just put the line in our budget, and September, October, we knew we were going to spend $100 or whatever getting cookie dough or paper or something, whatever it was that they were doing that year. Even if we didn't need it, we knew we were going to buy something. We were going to figure out something that we needed, that we could use. So the point is, though, so even there, like we learned that pattern, so even there, we did think about how much we put into the budget, but we also knew now to look for it in September. Because the first couple of years, it was like, oh, now we got to rearrange the budget to figure out and spend and, how we're going to do this because we need to do it. Well, after a while, it's like, well, okay, I've noticed this happens every September. Maybe I should plan for that, and you figure it out, right?
Yeah.
It's the same reason that people are surprised that December, is Christmas every year. Like they move that holiday around. They don't move that holiday around, So, but yet it sneaks up on us because you just aren't thinking about it. That's why budgeting being somewhat manual helps them begin to develop that muscle memory, I guess not really muscle, but you know what I mean, that money memory. There we go. We'll coin that phrase, that money memory, so that they begin to develop that pattern and understand kind of the ebb and flow of their particular life. Because guess what? It's going to be different. I guarantee you, your money flow is different than mine. Because we have two different lives with two different sets of priorities and two different, families and live in two different parts of the country.
I was like, I could tell that you live in Texas because you said HEB for your grocery.
Yep. Hi, HEB.
and one thing, just more on taking a step back and saying that there's.
I guess I could have said Aldi's.
Oh, that would work too.
Yeah, but we don't have Aldi's.
Okay. Yeah, you're out in the sticks, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is looking at on a client level, right? We talked about the importance of being intentional and making some of it more manual while allowing some of it to be more automated. And I think taking that same idea with how we teach our clients to do those processes and to set up those systems, recording videos and giving them some worksheets and walkthroughs so that they can, on their own time, go through and get the basics of the system down, kind of the planning, like that spreadsheet, and then also some walkthrough videos or tutorials on how to use, whether it's YNAB or Mint. I know that YNAB and Mint have tutorials, but over time, what I've found is my specific ideal client has certain specific questions that always come up that aren't always in the tutorials. So what I would say is to help add more value in the client calls, just think about what resources you can give clients outside. Again, it could be PDFs, it could be videos that will help them get up to speed quicker and do some of that heavy lifting outside. So then when you get into the client sessions, you can do it more intentionally and they already have that foundation set.
Well, and you can target and answer the questions that they actually have. The questions they have that come about from putting it in practice, as opposed to spend the whole coaching session teaching them how to put numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yep, they'll get a lot more value out of the session by doing it before.
And so one of the things, like within Coach Connections, one of the tools that we have available for all the coaches that are a member is what we call the Assistant Financial Coach and the 15-minute spending plan. And it actually is those videos. And they're not perfect, but they're not intended to be. They're intended to get the client started and up to speed outside of the coaching call. They don't replace you as a coach, but then you as a coach get to add value and go deeper with the client and help them do the thing where they're looking at it and they're going, well, I put everything down and I'm negative $4,000. Okay, great. Let's talk about that.
Yep.
How's that going to work for you after 6 months? Not so great. Okay, great. Then let's figure out what we're going to do about it, and you can actually have the tougher conversations, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yep, I agree fully.
Perfect. To wrap up, you have speaking of Coach Connections, there is a free virtual meetup next week, right?
Yes, we have Coach Connections. In fact, 1 p.m. Central Time, Tuesday next week. Instead of attending a live with me on it, if you want to go to a virtual coach meetup that Coach Connections is hosting, that is a chance to get your questions answered live by folks that have been coaching for 8+ years. In most cases, we're usually on there. Also a chance to see other folks that are coaching, and a lot of times you get value even if you don't ask a question, just in hearing the questions that are asked and the answers that are given by other folks as well. I'll put that in the chat, but you can go to coachconnections.com and there's a little button there that says sign up for the virtual meetup. Sign up for it and you'll get an email ahead of time with the Zoom and everything, and just join. We can host up to 100 people live on the Zoom, so come early. We've gotten close to full before, so
yeah, you've had like 200+ signups. Yeah. I remember, and it's a great price too. So
free, yeah.
Always a good price.
Yeah,
cool.
We do that just because, again, coaching it's a lonely job. And just like you've built this group to be a place where people can go and find community, we do the virtual coaching meetups as just another way that coaches can go and find community. So we do that just to add to the coaching community, is the why behind it.
Yeah, and it's cool to have it. I mean, this is a fun way to take questions ahead of time and answer them between the two of us. And I think it's really important to have that space where people can be on live and ask their questions too. That's really cool. You all are doing that.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing everybody there. And I know you've got to get ready for your next client call. So
do it. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.